شاء الله. You can start.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وما أصابكم يوم التقى الجمعان فبإذن الله وليعلم الذين نافقوا وقيل لهم تعالوا قاتلوا في سبيل الله أو ادفعوا قالوا لو نعلم قتالا لاتبعناكم هم للكفر يومئذ أقرب منهم للإيمان يقولون بأفواههم ما ليس في قلوبهم والله أعلم بما يكتمون الذين قالوا لإخوانهم وقعدوا لو أطاعونا ما قتلوا قل فادرءوا عن أنفسكم الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون فرحين بما آتاهم الله من فضله ويستبشرون بالذين لم يلحقوا بهم من خلفهم ألا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون يستبشرون بنعمة من الله وفضل وأن الله لا يضيع أجر المؤمنين الذين استجابوا لله والرسول من بعد ما أصابهم القرح للذين أحسنوا منهم واتقوا أجر عظيم الذين قال لهم الناس إن الناس قد جمعوا لكم فاخشوهم فزادهم إيمانا وقالوا حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل فانقلبوا بنعمة من الله وفضل لم يمسسهم سوء واتبعوا رضوان الله والله ذو فضل عظيم إنما ذلكم الشيطان يخوف أولياءه فلا تخافوهم وخافون إن كنتم مؤمنين ولا يحزنك الذين يسارعون في الكفر إنهم لن يضروا الله شيئا يريد الله ألا يجعل لهم حظا في الآخرة ولهم عذاب عظيم إن الذين اشتروا الكفر بالإيمان لن يضروا الله شيئا ولهم عذاب أليم ولا يحسبن الذين كفروا أنما نملي لهم خير لأنفسهم إنما نملي لهم ليزدادوا إثما ولهم عذاب مهين. ما كان الله ليذر المؤمنين على ما أنتم عليه حتى يميز الخبيث من الطيب، وما كان الله ليطلعكم على الغيب ولكن الله يجتبي من رسله من يشاء فآمنوا بالله ورسله وإن تؤمنوا وتتقوا فلكم أجر عظيم. ولا يحسبن الذين يبخلون بما آتاهم الله من فضله هو خيرا لهم، بل هو شر لهم، سيطوقون ما بخلوا به يوم القيامة، ولله ميراث السماوات والأرض والله بما تعملون خبير. لقد سمع الله قول الذين قالوا إن الله فقير ونحن أغنياء، سنكتب ما قالوا وقتلهم الأنبياء بغير حق ونقول ذوقوا عذاب الحريق، ذلك بما قدمت أيديكم وأن الله ليس بظلام للعبيد. الذين قالوا إن الله عهد إلينا ألا نؤمن لرسول حتى يأتينا بقربان تأكله النار، قل قد جاءكم رسل من قبلي بالبينات وبالذي قلتم فلم قتلتموهم إن كنتم صادقين. فإن كذبوك فقد كذب رسل من قبلك جاءوا بالبينات والزبر والكتاب المنير، كل نفس ذائقة الموت وإنما توفون أجوركم يوم القيامة، فمن زحزح عن النار وأدخل الجنة فقد فاز، وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور. لتبلون في أموالكم وأنفسكم ولتسمعن من الذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبلكم ومن الذين أشركوا أذى كثيرا وإن تصبروا وتتقوا فإن ذلك من عزم الأمور. وإذ أخذ الله ميثاق الذين أوتوا الكتاب لتبيننه للناس ولا تكتمونه فنبذوه وراء ظهورهم واشتروا به ثمنا قليلا فبئس ما يشترون. لا تحسبن الذين يفرحون بما أتوا ويحبون أن يحمدوا بما لم يفعلوا فلا تحسبنهم بمفازة من العذاب ولهم عذاب أليم. ولله ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء قدير. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته وما للظالمين من أنصار. ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. فاستجاب لهم ربهم أني لا أضيع عمل عامل منكم من ذكر أو أنثى بعضكم من بعض فالذين هاجروا وأخرجوا من ديارهم وأوذوا في سبيلي وقاتلوا لأكفرن عنهم سيئاتهم ولأدخلنهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار ثوابا من عند الله والله عنده حسن الثواب. لا يغرنك تقلب الذين كفروا في البلاد متاع قليل ثم مأواهم جهنم وبئس المهاد لكن الذين اتقوا ربهم لهم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها نزلا من عند الله وما عند الله خير للأبرار وإن من أهل الكتاب لمن يؤمن بالله أنزل إليكم وما أنزل إليهم خاشعين لله لا يشترون بآيات الله ثمنا قليلا أولئك لهم أجرهم عند ربهم إن الله سريع الحساب يا أيها الذين آمنوا اصبروا وصابروا ورابطوا واتقوا الله لعلكم تفلحون صدق الله العظيم. Now, inshallah, Sheikh Saim Asif will join us for Tafsir al-Quran. So please stand by.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن العظيم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما فلا تتبعوا الهوى أن تعدلوا وإن تلووا أو تعرضوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا. صدق الله العظيم. Alhamdulillah, the great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to once again be talking about his greatness and to be talking about his Quran. As we mentioned, one of the days when we were talking about Surah Baqarah, we mentioned one of the ayat in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ, that if you remember me, I will remember you. And he mentioned the different ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we can remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We mentioned that that the different ways in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remember us with his mercy, with his forgiveness, with his blessings, if we remember him. And actually, from amongst the greatest remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Quran, right? To be involved with the Quran, as mentioned in the Hadith Qudsi, من شغله القرآن وذكري عن مسألتي أعطيته أفضل ما أعطي السائلين. كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. It's mentioned in the Hadith that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is narrating from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly that whomsoever the Quran and my remembrance keeps him busy from asking me. Meaning, let's say if you're so busy with the Quran that you don't even get time to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَعْطَيْتُهُ أَفْضَلَ مَا أُعْطِيَ السَّائِلِينَ. I give that person who's so busy with the Quran better than that, or the best of that which is given to those who are asking. Right? So automatically, people might be asking the best of all things, and you're automatically going to get that if you're busy with the Quran. And what's the reason for that? The hadith goes on, وَفَضْلُ كَلَامِ اللَّهِ عَلَى سَائِرِ الْكَلَامِ وَفَضْلِ اللَّهِ كَفَضْلِ اللَّهِ عَلَى خَلْقِهِ. And this is something we mentioned multiple times in these sessions, that the virtue of the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over all other speech is like the virtue of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over his creation. And every single person with any sort of intellect knows the virtue of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over his creation. So obviously we would know that the virtue of Allah's speech is better. Allah's speech is better than any other speech. So it's a great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to consistently be hearing about the Quran, to consistently be reading the Quran. May Allah give us tawfiq to increase our attachment with the Quran in this month, as the month already reaches the halfway point. We are nearing the end of the month already. It's the days are flying by. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to take full advantage of these days. Moving forward, this is an ayah I had mentioned what we were speaking about, the proof Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned at the beginning of Surah Baqarah of the validity of the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam's prophethood, and the proof that he is definitely sent from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this ayah, so we mentioned that one of the proofs that the Quran is true and directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the fact that it doesn't have any inconsistencies. This is the ayah that I mentioned, and it is from Surah An-Nisa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do they not, we'll read the translation, do they not then reflect on the Quran? Had it been from anyone other than Allah, they would have certainly found in it many inconsistencies, right? What does it mean by inconsistencies? One place it's saying this thing, and another place it's saying that thing. And the nature of the speech of human beings is that if you were to go through any book of a human being, especially when somebody writes more and more, when somebody writes less, a little amount, then it's easy for them to stay away from being inconsistent because they can check it over and over again. But now if somebody writes more and more and more, you will find a lot of places where they contradict themselves, right? And that's why you see even the books of the scholars, sometimes if they write a lot, sometimes you find they're being a little inconsistent because they're human beings at the end of the day, and everybody is prone to mistakes. Whereas the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter how much, and people definitely have tried, and some people, like I said, who are enemies of Islam, they try to bring that which that which seems like inconsistencies. It seems like the Quran is contradicting itself. It seems like it's saying one thing in one place, but it's saying something completely the opposite other place. But in reality, the only examples they can bring are things which are completely taken out of context. And if one was to read it in their context and to understand the proper meaning of the verse, of the ayah, then they will see that in reality there's no contradiction whatsoever, right? And this verse still stands true. And Allah is challenging everybody that why don't they reflect on the Quran? They should try and just think and think and think and try to bring something which is contradicting the Quran, and they will never be able to find it. They will never be able to find any sort of inconsistency in the Quran, right? And like I mentioned, that there's actually many books, right? Ibn Qutayba, Ta'wil Mukhtalif al-Quran, and a more modern book by Ash-Shanqiti. It's called Daf'u Iham al-Ittirab an Ayat al-Kitab. These books are dedicated to solely to these ayat that enemies of Islam tried to bring to try to make it seem like they're contradicting each other. This book is solely, these books are solely meant to refute these notions and to show that in reality those people who think these ayat are contradicting each other are not contradicting each other, rather they are in full harmony with one another. But you just need to properly understand the context, you need to properly understand the meaning of the verse, then you will see that in reality there is no contradiction. And that's why it's important. You'll see many times, don't ever get like confused, don't ever get scared when you see some sort of enemy of Islam or somebody trying to prove Islam wrong, when they bring ayat and they say that, look, your Quran says this, or they bring a hadith, look, your Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says this. Because 100, I'm not saying 99%, I'm saying 100% of the time when they're saying that, there is much more explanation behind it, and most likely they are translating it wrong as well. But the thing is, because if we don't know the Arabic language, then we can't understand it for ourselves. And that's one thing, alhamdulillah, that once I've learned more of the Arabic language, you see that whenever these people quote the Quran, whenever they quote the hadith, they always misquote it, right? And they always translate it a little wrong to make it seem more, or even if they translate it correctly or they get it from a credible Muslim website or whatever, they're not understanding the context whatsoever. That's why it's very, very important to understand the Quran with its context and with not just with the context of the Quran, but you need to have a general background of the other ayat as well. You need to understand it in light of other ayat, because so many times where you read one ayat and you get one meaning, and it's very dangerous if you just keep that one meaning in your mind, because you have to consider all the ayat on that specific subject, right? For example, there are some ayat in which you can understand that anybody, if you just take it out of context, you might take it to mean that anybody who just believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, then that person will be saved on the day of judgment. But then you look at, there's so many other ayat which talk about, for example, inna dina inda Allah Islam, the only acceptable deen in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Islam. Another ayah mentions that وَمَنْ يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَنْ يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ, that a person who seeks a deen besides Islam, it will never, on the day of judgment, it will never be accepted from him, right? So, and there's so many other ayat which show clearly إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَكْفُرُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ وَيُرِيدُونَ أَن يُفَرِّقُوا بَيْنَ اللَّهِ وَرُسُلِهِ. Allah talks about people who they want to differentiate between Allah and His Rasul. They say that we believe in part, we believe in Allah, but we don't believe in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah says, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ حَقًّا. Those are truly the true disbelievers, right? So if you look in the context of all the other ayat on the subject, it's very clear that we can't say that anybody who just believes in Allah is going to Jannah. No, rather we see it clear that only those who believe in Islam, they're those who are going to Jannah. But unfortunately, because people don't understand that, they just take a translation of the Quran and they don't know all the other verses on the subject, and then that's why that leads them to misguidance. So that's why we mentioned that definitely it's great to read the Quran with translation, but at the same time we have to couple it with scholarly guidance and scholarly recommendations. I mentioned some translations at the beginning, and I mentioned that Mufti Taqi Osmani's translation is good because he has footnotes in order to explain things such as these, so that people don't get wrong impressions when they're reading the Quran. Another great book is actually written by his father, and it's a great translation, and it's a great tafsir of the Quran. It's actually written with laymen in mind. It's not such a scholar, because if you look at other tafsir of the Quran, most people, if they don't have a scholarly background, they'll get bored because there's so much detail in it, and they also get confused. But like for example, Tafsir ibn Kathir, it's translated, but we probably wouldn't recommend everybody to read it because there's a lot of scholarly discussion in there. A great tafsir for the general public to read is Ma'ariful Quran. Again, I'll say it again, Ma'ariful Quran, Mariful Quran. It's by Mufti Shafi Uthmani, rahimahullah. It's translated in English, and it's written for the purpose, with the layman in mind, a non-scholarly crowd in mind, so that anybody can look at these ayat and understand it in the proper context. Okay, went a little tangent over there, but the main point of this ayat is to prove the veracity of the Quran and to prove that it is definitely from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's a challenge as well to anybody that if you want to prove it's not from Allah, then you can find one inconsistency in it, but in reality, you can never find any inconsistencies in the Quran. And then another ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا حُيِّيتُم بِتَحِيَّةٍ فَحَيُّوا بِأَحْسَنَ مِنْهَا أَوْ رُدُّوهَا. When you are greeted with a salutation, greet with one better than it or return the same. أَوْ رُدُّوهَا. إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ حَسِيبًا. Indeed, Allah is the one who takes account of everything. So, in this ayah, what does it mean by salutation? It means, basically, it's referring to Assalamu alaikum. So, in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that when you're greeted, when somebody says salam to you, then what do you have to do? Greet with one better than it or return the same. So, what does that mean? So, if somebody says Assalamu alaikum to you, you're required to say Wa alaikum assalam. At least, the very least you can do is to return the same, right? That's why it says or return the same. That means that's the lesser option. But the better thing to do is to greet with one better than it. So if somebody says Assalamu alaikum to you, and you say wa alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah. Or you can even say the whole thing, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And if you see somebody says assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, then you should say the same. And this is an important thing to note, that it's actually fard to reply to salam. If somebody says salam to you, it is fard. You have to reply back, right? It's unfortunate that sometimes you say salam to people and I guess they don't feel the need to reply back to you. But we have to know that if you don't reply, you're actually sinful. If you don't say salam, saying salam is a very, very, very important and a great sunnah, as we will explain shortly. It's an amazing sunnah. But at the same time, if you don't say salam, you won't be sinful. But now if somebody says salam to you and you don't reply to the salam, then you will be sinful. That's an important thing to note. So we have to be sure to reply with salam, and if possible, try to reply with something longer and better so that you'll get more reward, inshallah. So I just want to highlight some beautiful aspects of salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gave us this beautiful greeting, Salamun alaykum, Assalamu alaykum. And this is a special greeting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. This is the same greeting actually that even the angels will be saying to us when we enter Jannah. What will they say? They will say, Salamun alaykum bima sabartum, fa ni'ma uqbad dar. May peace be upon you, Salamun alaykum, because of that which you have endured. Imagine this dunya, we went through so much hardship in terms, just in general, we went through hardships, and specifically for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we sacrificed, we went against our desires. For example, in these days we are fasting, we're going against our desires. So that's a form of sabr as well, a sabru ala ta'at, having patience and enduring and doing good deeds and going against our nafs. That's a form of sabr as well. So they will say that, peace be upon you, Salamun alaykum, because of that which you have endured. And how great is the outcome and the end result of what you have done, basically, more or less the meaning. So imagine that is the same greeting that the angels will greet us with when we enter Jannah. That's the same greeting that we are greeting each other with in this dunya. So a common translation, when we see Assalamu alaikum translated, we see that it's translated as may peace be upon you, and that is a correct translation. It is making dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala descends peace upon that person. And another translation, you could say that you're making dua that that person stays safe and that person is protected from all sort of harm. So that is a correct translation. But another translation, and it can be argued that it is a more accurate translation because it mentioned something in hadith which is mentioned, which alludes to that, is that this actually means As-salamu raqibun alaykum. As-salam is actually one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as we probably know, those who have memorized 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they know that As-salam is one of the names of Allah. And we actually see that in Surah Hashr. We know that for those of us who know the last ruku of Surah Hashr, in which Allah says, Huwa Allahu alladhi la ilaha illahu alimul ghayb wa shahadati wa rahmanur rahim. Huwa Allahu alladhi la ilaha illahu al-malik al-quddus as-salam. So as-salam is mentioned as one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who is free from all is free from all sort of faults. That is the meaning of as-salam, and it is the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you're saying Assalamu alaikum, you're actually saying that may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be a guardian over you. So you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's protection to be on that person. So imagine how powerful this greeting is. So so this is why we should be very consistent, and we should take this as an important task, that we should, every time we see any Muslim brother or sister, we should say salam to them, because we don't realize how great of a great reward we will get for spreading salam, right? As mentioned in a hadith, لا تدخلوا الجنة حتى تحابوا حتى تؤمنوا. You will not enter Jannah until you believe. ولا تؤمنوا حتى تحابوا. And you will not believe until you mutually love one another. So imagine, this is important, about how important this point is, that you will not truly believe when in the hadith and in the Quran also many times when it says this person is not a believer, And then it mentions some good quality. It doesn't mean he's not a believer as in he's a disbeliever now. For example, we know the famous hadith, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you is a true believer. None of you is a believer who loves for his brother what he loves for himself. So, we commonly hear it translated as true believer, but in reality, in the hadith, there's nothing mentioned that says true. But we just it's a form of interpretation, because we know that a person who doesn't love for his brother what he loves for himself doesn't mean that he's a disbeliever now, because then unfortunately, many of us will have to question our iman. May Allah protect us. But it doesn't mean that that person's a disbeliever. Rather, it means that that person didn't have the highest level of iman. So same here. So over here we see that in order to attain the higher level of iman, we have to mutually love one another. And then the hadith goes on to say, should I not tell you something by which, if you do so, you will love one another? Spread salam amongst you. So imagine, if you look at it, you can say through a translated property that spreading salam is actually a means of entering Jannah, right? Why? Because Nabi Sallam said, you're not going to enter Jannah until you believe. And then he said, you won't believe until you love one another. And he said, how can you love one another? It's to spread salam. So therefore, indirectly, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is saying that that you spreading salam, meaning saying it abundantly, every time you see somebody saying salam, that is a means of you entering Jannah. And over here in this hadith, he said it indirectly, but in other ahadith, he actually said it directly. In a beautiful hadith narrated by Abdullah bin Salam, I mentioned him earlier, he was one of the rabbis who accepted Islam in the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in Medina. He said that when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam first came to Medina, I came to see him. Obviously, the word is spreading that a person who claims to be a prophet has come to our city, and it wasn't such a big city. So he came and looked and saw him. And he said, as soon as I saw his face, I knew that this person's face could not be the face of a liar. And he said, and from amongst the first things he said was, Afshu salam, spread salam, spread basically say assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum, and say it abundantly to everybody who amongst the Muslims who you see. وَأَطْعِمُ الطَّعَامِ, and feed people food. وَصِلُ الْأَرْحَامِ, and connect, keep good ties with the people, especially specifically those related to you through the womb, meaning your family members. So keep good ties with your families. وَصَلُّوا بِاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّاسُ نِيَامٌ, and pray at nighttime while people are sleeping. And so what is the result of all this? And remember, the first thing I mentioned was, that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned was to spread salam amongst the people. The first thing he mentioned is, تَدْخُلُ الْجَنَّةَ بِسَلَامٍ, you will enter Jannah safely. You will enter Jannah safely. So imagine, salam is such a great action that is actually a means of entering Jannah. So this is something that we should all be mindful of, and try to say salam to all the Muslims that we see, right? And then this is not limited to those people we know. It's actually one of the signs of the Day of Judgment that people will say salam to only those people that they know, right? The hadith says, وَتَقْرَأُ السَّلَامَ عَلَى مَنْ عَرَفْتَ وَمَنْ لَمْ تَعْرِفْ, كما قال, that you say salam to the one that you know and the one you do not know. And actually, if you say salam first, that's actually a sign of you being free from arrogance, as another hadith mentions. So inshallah, we should make intention that we should start spreading salam amongst the people. And this will be a great means of building love with one another, especially if you feel like you have some animosity, some sort of ill feelings towards somebody. If you start saying salam to that person, like, a lot of times we try to avoid them, but if we say salam to them, then you will see that slowly that animosity, that ill feeling will go away, right? Because this hadith clearly says that, should I not tell you something by which, if you do, you will love one another, right? So spreading salam is mentioned. Another hadith mentioned that you give gifts to one another, that will spread love. So that's another thing you can do if you feel ill feelings toward another person, and sometimes it's for no reason. So may Allah give us all tawfiq. And again, I just want to mention that point one more time, that if you say salam to somebody, that's a great sunnah, as I mentioned the different ahadith about it. If you're the first one to say salam, but let's say even if you weren't to say it, you wouldn't be sinful. But now, once somebody has said salam to you, now it's fard upon you. You have to reply. And that is why they're actually, the ulama, the scholars have actually written multiple times where it's makruh for you to say salam to somebody. Why? Because now it is fard upon that person to reply. So you're putting him in a hard position, right? And one of those times is when the person is reading Quran. If the person is reading Quran, then you shouldn't go and say salam to him because you're disturbing him, and now it's fard upon him to reply. You're breaking off the recitation of the Quran. And when people are eating as well, they're eating, so now they have to say reply to salam in multiple places. So I wish I had time to go into detail and list all of them, maybe next session, inshallah. But it's important to know these things. That's why it's important for us to learn our deen, so that we, even these simple things, knowing when to say salam and when not to say salam. If we read the ahadith, we will think that in general, we have to say salam all the time. But we realize that that's not the case. There are some certain times where it's actually worse to say salam than not. That is why it is very important. That's why knowledge uplifts us. So we have to spend time in the gatherings of the scholars to learn these things. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq. It's an important ayah, and I guess we'll conclude with this because there's not much time left. So in this ayah I recited in the beginning, so I won't recite it again. So we'll just read the translation briefly. O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses for Allah, even if it may be against yourselves or your parents and relatives. Whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. So follow not personal inclination, lest you not be just. And if you distort your testimony or refuse to give it, then indeed Allah is ever knowledgeable of what you, ever acquainted with what you do. So, and then there's another ayah in Surah Ma'idah, the upcoming surah, which is very similar in the wording, except instead of saying shuhada qawwamina bil qisti shuhada lillah, it says qawwamina lillahi shuhada bil qist, and then there's some more detail after it. In that ayah, it says, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا. Do not allow your hatred for somebody do not allow your hatred to somebody to now be unjust to them, right? And that's something that's very common, unfortunately, that when we hate somebody, we end up having a bias towards them. So then everything they do now, we are so unjust that we interpret all of their actions negatively, and that makes us unjust in their like. Whereas Allah is telling us that you let not your hatred of anybody make you now become unjust to them. And actually, then after this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he highlights that, he says, "I'dilu huwa aqrabu lit-taqwa." Be just, because that is closer to taqwa. So in reality, being just is directly related to our taqwa, to our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this ayah is a very important ayah when it comes to justice, that even if you're going against your own self or your parents and relatives, you have to be just. And you cannot be unjust. So, and actually, there was an article circulating a few years back, I remember, where the Harvard University had some sort of display going on. So then, and they were displaying different words of justice that from throughout the history, and this is one of the few words that they had shared with the people, that one of the greatest examples of justice, right? And there's a quote from the article: "There are approximately 24 quotations on display in the art installation created by the law school. The three most prominently displayed at the entrance of the art installations are quotes from St. Augustine, the Holy Quran, which is this ayah, and the Magna Carta. According to the Harvard School of Law, these quotations illustrate the universality of the concept of justice throughout time and cultures." But again, the important thing about this ayah is, I don't know what the other quotes were, but it's likely that they didn't highlight the aspect of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being aware of what we're doing, because that is the main thing that will truly allow us to be just. Otherwise, if you have any other measure of justice, it is bound to be corrupted. But now, if you always know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching you, He's going to take you to account for everything that you do, is much more likely that you will stay away from injustice. If you truly have fear of the akhirah, then you will be just. Otherwise, there's no real reason for you to want to be just. So that is an important thing that this ayah highlights. And again, we don't need the Harvard University to tell us that this ayah is a great representation of justice. We should know it ourselves. So the thing is that people, I guess, they like to see validation from these institutions, but we don't need validation from these institutions. But it's nice to see that they also recognize that the Quran is a book of justice and is a book of great values. So and there's an interesting hadith which is related to the meaning of this ayah. The Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, "Unsur akhaka al-zaliman aw madluman." Help your brother, whether he is the oppressor or the oppressed. So whether he is a zalim or the madlum, you should help your brother. So outwardly, if you listen to the speech, it sounds kind of unfair, because why would you help your brother if he is oppressing somebody? But in reality, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was saying this intentionally, because it was common amongst the Arabs of that time. This was their statement in the time of Jahiliyyah. This was their, you could say, their slogan in the time of Jahiliyyah, because they were known to be very muta'assib. They used to be very attached to their tribes. No matter, even if a person from amongst their tribe did a wrong thing, they killed somebody from another tribe or whatever they did, but now, and then that tribe comes and they say that we want to take this person to account, and we want justice to be meted out, but they would refuse, and they would fight on behalf of that person, even if he had done wrong, even if he was an oppressor, they would help him, because that was their motto: help your brother, whether he is the oppressor or the oppressed. The Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said this, the same statement, help your brother, whether he is the oppressor or oppressed. And he knew that the Sahaba obviously are going to, because they understood the general message of Islam, that Islam would never condone such a thing, that you help a person who's an oppressor, because there's so many ahadith which go against oppression. So they said that, how can we help our brother if we understand oppressed, but how can we help our brother if he is the oppressor? So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that if he is oppressing somebody, then you prevent him from that oppression. So you're actually helping him, because when you're stopping somebody from doing dhulm, because we mentioned previously, if you look at it, and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala mentions, when a person does a sin, when somebody does something which is against the commands of Allah, then they're actually doing dhulm, they're oppressing their own selves, they're doing wrong to their own selves, because it's only going to harm them in the hereafter, and sometimes in this world as well. So now when you're stopping him from his oppression, when you're stopping him from his wrongdoing, from his evil, then you're actually helping him out. So that is what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam meant. And look, he took the statement of Jahiliyyah, which was a completely wrong statement, but he actually made it into a correct statement. He said, help your brother whether he is the oppressor or oppressed. And he explained it doesn't mean that you help him do his oppression. Rather, it means that you actually stop him from doing his oppression, and that is the way you're going to help him. So may Allah allow us to give us tawfiq and allow us to be just, even if it goes against our own selves, even if it goes against our own parents or our relatives, it doesn't matter. And look how far away us as Muslims, especially we look even in the Muslim world, how far we are from this justice, where we see left and right this oppression going on. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uplift the state of this ummah and allow us to live justly, or allow us to live according to the teachings of the Quran and Hadith. Just one last ayah. Quickly we'll go through it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, is describing the salah of the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. So this is quite scary if we really ponder about it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا قَامُوا إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ قَامُوا كُسَالَى يُرَاءُونَ النَّاسَ وَلَا يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. When they stand up for prayer, for salah, they do it half-heartedly. And another way you can translate, it's a nice translation. Another way you could translate it is kaslan, means lazily. So when they're standing up for prayer, they do it half-heartedly. They do it lazily. And what is the reason they're praying? وَلَا يُرَاءُونَ النَّاسَ. They do it only to be seen by the people. And this is the most scary part. وَلَا يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Hardly remembering Allah at all. So it's scary because Allah didn't say that they don't remember Allah at all. He didn't say وَلَا يَذْكُرُونَ اللَّهَ. He said they hardly remember Allah. They don't remember Allah except very little, which is very scary, because we have to take ourselves to account. We see in the Quran and in the ahadith as well, we see that one thing that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do is they mention the qualities of the believers, right? For example, in Surah Mu'minun, Hopefully we'll get there, inshallah. We can go through those ayat as well. In the beginning of Surah Mu'minun, I think the first 18, 20 ayahs, they're all talking about different great qualities of the believers. And these are basically like a litmus test we can take to see, we look at these qualities and see that, am I at that level of iman, the higher level of iman? And I mentioned this a couple right now, just today, the hadith that none of you be a true believer until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself. So that also is a litmus test to see, are we at a higher level of iman where, now I'm loving for my brother what I love for myself. And we know that the different also we mentioned the hadith that you will not truly believe until you mutually love one another, right? So there's many things like that mentioned in the hadith and the Quran which tell us what it means to be at a higher state of iman, what qualities you see in yourself when you see that when you, in order to realize that you are at a higher state of iman. And so it's actually a means of motivation for us to build these qualities in ourselves. Whereas, and on the other hand, Allah SWT has highlighted the qualities of the disbelievers and also the qualities of the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. And so has Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the hadith as well. What is the reason for that? Is for us to stay away from those qualities, because obviously being a hypocrite is the worst of all things. Allah has mentioned in these same few ayats that they're at the lowest level of the hellfire. So that is why we have to stay away from their qualities. And it doesn't mean that if you have these qualities, now automatically you are a hypocrite, na'udhu billah, and that you're going to the lowest level of hell, na'udhu billah, may Allah protect us. Because there's two types of hypocrisy. There's nifaq amali, nifaq i'tiqadi. So there's the hypocrisy which is related to belief. And that is the main one that is talked about in the ayat. Especially the ones which talk about those that are going to the hellfire, the munafiqeen, the hypocrites that are going to the hellfire. They're those who, in reality, they don't believe in Islam, but they outwardly show that they're Muslims. But that is not inshallah, the hypocrisy that we are fearing that we're going to fall into. Inshallah, we are strong believers. Rather, we are fearing that we will fall into a second form of hypocrisy, which is nifaq amali. And that is that hypocrisy which relates to our actions, meaning we're saying one thing, we're saying we're believers, but we're doing the actions which are completely against that. So we should fear falling into this category and try to avoid those qualities of the hypocrites which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam talk about specifically, so we can stay away from them, right? And so when we pass by these ayat and these ahadith talking about the qualities of the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, we have to stop and reflect on ourselves. Do I have these qualities in myself as well? For example, a hadith says there's three qualities of a hypocrite. إِذَا حَدَّثَ كَذَبَ, when he speaks, he lies. وَإِذَا وَعَدَ أَخْلَفَ, when he promises, then he goes against his promise. وَإِذَا اؤْتُمِنَ خَانَ, when he's entrusted with something, he goes against that trust. He breaks that trust. So over here, similarly, there's a quality of the disbelievers, the munafiqeen, the hypocrites that is mentioned, and it is regarding their salah. So we look at our salah. Is it closer to the description of the believers and the Sahaba, or closer to that of the hypocrites? Because about the believers, Allah says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. He says that they are those who are humble and attentive in their salah. They're heavily concentrated in their salah. Right? And we see, if we look at the salah of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we read the ahadith, we read the stories of Sahaba radiallahu anhum, we see how their salah was, right? They would humble themselves in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They would have tears rolling down their cheeks, right? This is the description mentioned in one of the ahadith. I'm going to read it. He stood up in salah, about Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He stood up in salah, humbling himself before his creator with such sincerity that tears rolled down his cheeks to his beard and onto his breast. He then bowed for ruku' and sujood, and his tears flowed down as fast as before. And after he raising his head from sajda, he continued weeping in this manner until Bilal radiallahu anhu announced the approach of Fajr. And then it goes on. And in another narration, it was mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ's feet would get swollen because of this very long rak'at in salah. And then is mentioned about the Salah of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, that he would stand in salah motionless like pieces of wood stuck in the ground. That is how firm he would be. It wouldn't be always moving around, looking around, this and that. That's why one of the tabi'een, he had mentioned when he saw somebody moving around so much in salah, he said that لو خشع قلبه لخشع جوارحه. If if his heart had khushur and if his heart truly had concentration in it, his it would be seen on his body. It would be seen on his body parts that he would all that they would also have tranquility and he wouldn't be moving around so much. Right. So that is a sign of the concentration that he had in his salah, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And Abdullah bin Zubair radiallahu anhu, who is a Sahabi, he was related to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, and he actually learned his salah from Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. He was his grandson. So he mentions that, as mentioned about him, that he remained in sajda for so long and he would be so motionless therein that birds would come and perch on his back. And when these Sahaba, when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would pray, they wouldn't know what was going on around them because they were so concentrated in their salah. Where now we compare that with the quality of the salah of the disbelievers, the munafiqeen, the hypocrites. What do? They stand lazily. So maybe they're halfway on one foot, halfway on the other foot sometimes, and only to be seen by the people. Sometimes we're not coming for salah with jama'ah, and then we start thinking, oh, what are the people going to think that this person's not coming? So then we start coming again. We have to be careful about our intention for praying salah, for doing it. And then the most scary part, as I said, Allah says they hardly remembering Allah at all. That they don't. He didn't say that they don't remember Allah at all. They hardly remember Allah. Now, if we reflect on our own salah, how much percentage of the salah is us remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how much is it us thinking about random things? And I don't need to go into any detail. We can just all leave on this note, and everybody right now just take a couple minutes to reflect on our salah and think that is it closer to the salah of the hypocrites and closer to the salah of the believers? If so, how can we get our salah to a higher state and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more? That will come with just in general remembering Allah more throughout our day, specifically during the times before salah. That's why we see that we have sunnah to pray before salah most of the time. For I think basically all the salahs except Maghrib, we have sunnah which we pray beforehand. And we should give some time even beforehand to go and sit before we pray salah, sit down and just think about what we're about to do. We're about to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allow yourself to be very calm and to allow yourself to get into the mode that you're going to pray salah. And that is when we will see our khushur will be at a much higher level. And there are many other things that ulama have mentioned to build our khushur, but we don't have time to go into it right now. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all khushur in our salah and allow us to implement everything that we have learned today, as well as in all the other previous sessions. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك